I'm Professor Stephen Dyson.
And I'm Professor Jeff Dudas.
And we are two professors who have just spent several hours listening to Taylor Swift's new album, Life of a Showgirl. Yeah. We're here to give some sort of instant reactions as to the themes, the ideas that we see in the lyrics and the music. Jeff, you're a big Swiftie. You're also someone who spent a lot of time thinking about Taylor Swift's kind of worldview, how she presents herself in the culture and her cultural importance. You've been interviewed several times by publications such as Newsweek and NPR.
Yeah.
So a Taylor Swift album release, which actually nowadays is called an activation, I learned.
Oh.
It's called an activation. That's what happens at midnight. It used to be you'd get a physical CD, but now it's activated. It, you know, pops up on the telephone.
What?
Anyway, a Taylor Swift album activation is a big thing for you.
It's a big deal. It's been a while since we've had new music from her, and really the last sort of music-related element that we've heard from Taylor Swift had to do with her purchase of her original master albums, and that was in the spring. We haven't really heard much from her musically since, and she's been, in a way, laying low since the end of the Big Eras tour, but always sort of hanging around in the public eye in the way that only a huge superstar can actually hang around.
Yeah, so it's 12 songs, 41 minutes. I mean, my understanding is the last album was sort of this behemoth.
Yeah.
The critique in retrospect was that sort of everything that she'd written in that period was kind of released. There wasn't maybe enough curation. She'd maybe, the songs were, I don't know, a little interior, a little kind of self-referential. This album is very lean. It's very short, 12 songs, 41 minutes. It's quite poppy in its sensibility and quite sort of, I don't know, outward looking. Is that a reasonable summation?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would say about her previous album, The Tortured Poets Department, you have accurately relayed my impressions of that album. I don't know how general those impressions are, but I will say that it was precisely that experience with her previous album that left me a bit trepidatious about this one. I had really felt like those songs on the previous album, on The Tortured Poets Department, they felt to me to be so interior, so self-referential, and so specific to the actual events of Taylor's life that I had a very difficult time detecting the broader sort of outreach or points of connection with an audience that wasn't simply an audience obsessed with Taylor Swift's life. And I was concerned that she had maybe had gone beyond the moment of peak overexposure, and that it might be downhill from here, and that artistically she may have lost that capacity to keep her own experiences human enough, or to relay them in ways that were human enough that they can make broader connections with a wider audience. So I was excited about this release, but I can't say that I was on pins and needles waiting for it. If anything, I was a little more trepidatious. But happily, I think it's quite good. I think it's a really nice return to form for her in a lot of ways. I agree. It feels like she took her 12 best songs, and those are the ones that we get. And there are the themes that we'll talk about that are pretty consistent. They're her typical themes, right, over the course of her career. But I think she's got a lean and tight set of songs here that are much more immediately arresting and grabbing and intention-inducing, and they are critically varied. Each of the songs sounds different, of a piece with one another, but different enough that you don't get lost in this kind of miasma of tone and atmosphere. So I'm pretty enthusiastic so far with the new album.
Yeah, so from a tortured poet is a kind of internal, quiet sort of thing, and a showgirl is a sort of glitzy, you know, but also sort of blue collar, I guess. I mean, I know they don't literally wear the blue collar shirt, but you get the metaphor, a blue collar kind of thing and an outward kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it did occur to me, Jeff, I was excited when I saw the title of this album because we're two professors. Yeah. And it did seem to me that there's a real sort of analogy between what we do and what a showgirl does. You know, it's all for us kind of sequins and kind of glamorous revealing outfits in the classroom.
Yeah, without question.
Yeah, and then it's just blood, sweat and tears when we're back in our office, working hard on reading books and going to pointless meetings.
And in the same way that showgirls, I imagine, perform in ways that, you know, they feel like they're killing themselves out there, just every day going out there sweating bullets, taking the slings and arrows of public opinion. I mean, that's sort of what we do as well when we're standing in front of a class.
We're the real heroes.
Without question.
Absolutely. So that, I mean, my relationship with kind of Taylor Swift is like my relationship to all pop music. You know, you're the big kind of pop fan, and I've always traditionally been more into kind of indie rock and sort of Brit pop and that kind of thing. And so with Taylor Swift, I always find I sort of admire the edifice and the craft of it and the sheer sort of size of it, but I can never quite sort of step inside it. And, you know, so maybe, I don't know, maybe you'll convince me when we discuss these songs. But I did find it a comfortable listen. And what I mean by that is, like all of the best pop music, that these songs have to work immediately. I mean, that's what a pop song is. It can't be something that you have to listen to 10 times before you figure out the hook or the melody, so that they're sort of instantly digestible without sounding sort of too repetitive or too derivative. And it's a really, really hard line. It's really, really fine line. Like the line between totally derivative and, you know, exactly what a pop song should be doing is so difficult. Like, they're very, very close, and that's the whole trick, is staying on the right side of that line, isn't it?
It's walking that line. And what I think this album does well in multiple senses is walk the line. So it walks the line in exactly the way that you're discussing, which is what a pop song aesthetically has to do. It has to catch the audience. It has to catch the listener quickly, and then it has to stick around. And in order, and you're right, it's paradoxical, right? It's because it has to do two separate things. It has to be familiar enough that it catches the listener immediately, but it has to be distinct enough that it hangs around and doesn't just dissolve into every other 3-minute song that you've ever heard. And it's a very tight line to walk. I think the other thing that's happening, and this alludes to what I was suggesting earlier, is that she has to walk the bigger and bigger and bigger that Taylor Swift becomes, and the more outsized her persona and her life, the higher the level of superstardom she becomes, the more difficult it's got to be to walk that line between revelation of herself and revelation of her life, and that capacity to connect the specific emotions that she is feeling and experiencing with a broader audience, who are not billionaires, who are not vacationing in the French Riviera, who do not have famous spouses or partners, and who don't have famous friends. I think that this album does a really pretty good job of walking both of those lines.
Yeah, you have to say the challenges I face of being like super famous, having to be this public person, getting involved in beefs with, and who knows how real they are, but they're always played up in the media, but getting involved in beefs with other famous people, and having hyper famous boyfriends that sort of come and go. They're exactly analogous to me, a 36-year-old billionaire, than they are to you, whatever my target demographic is, you know, a younger person without that money and without that exposure. And of course, there's a way to do it. These are universal. They're not universal human experiences, but they can be universal human sentiments.
Yes.
But again, you're right. You're always walking a similar line. You know, musically or in persona terms, she's got to walk that line between the instantly familiar and the totally derivative.
Yeah.
And in sort of emotional or connective or lyrical terms, she's got to walk that line between, you know, singing about things that are obviously unique to very few people in the world, and connecting universally, but you've got to do it in a way that doesn't start to sound inauthentic or whiny or just like non-relatable.
Right. That's exactly it. And it's especially difficult, I think, in the pop genre, which, as you have alluded to, doesn't always have the longest or deepest tradition in really going much deeper than surface level emotion. You know, it doesn't have, for example, and this is somewhat relevant in the case of Taylor Swift, but, you know, pop music lyrically does not have the conventional kind of traditional emotional palette that something like country music has, right? Which is all about, in the best of country music anyway, is all about the travails of everyday life and the experiences of people struggling in circumstances not of their own making. This is also true of something like punk music or other kinds of, like, you know, hard rock music, right? In which the thematics tend to, or the genre at least tends to provide a kind of history that allows contemporary songwriters to go a bit deeper and to explore a bit more. And pop music, for better or worse, the best of it, I think, does show the capacity for real emotional depth, like like I think we see here. But a lot of it does exist on the surface, and it exists emotionally on the surface. And it becomes especially difficult, it seems to me, to walk the line of superstardom if you are confining your revelation, if you're confining your art to those kinds of surface emotions. I'm sad, I'm happy, right? You need to go a little deeper than that.
Right.
Because otherwise, hey, I'm sitting in the French Riviera, but I'm sad.
Right. So I want to take you through some themes that I kind of see in the album that'll allow us to talk about some of the specific songs and the qualities of them. So I thought there were sort of 5 basic themes. These I should just say these are just our instant reactions. There's no guarantee we've accurately identified what they are. We would,
listen to the album 4 times. I think, to both of us.
Yeah. And everybody's cutthroat in the comments. But if you want to give us your thoughts in the comment section, we'd love to hear that. Love to hear those. So theme number 1, I Found Love. Not the first time she's kind of sang about this, although not, often with different sort of chaps of various fame and fortune. I thought 4 songs kind of had this as the central thematic, Fate of Ophelia and Opalite, which I would say are, to me, the 2 sort of most immediately striking pop songs. I think there's nothing on here that's as stonking as her biggest hits, and maybe not quite trying to be as stonking as her biggest hits, but everything has a kind of strong melody and a very sort of machine-tooled production. There's a great deal of craftspersonship in these songs as pop songs. Fate of Ophelia, Opalite, I Found Love. Wood and Honey in different ways. Kind of I Found Love. Wood is a sort of very sexualized song, I think.
It's a horny song.
Yeah, and there is a horniness about this album that I think you were saying is relatively new for...
I can't remember hearing that kind of exploration of lust in previous Taylor Swift albums or previous eras, so to speak, of her career. Here, I think she's taking a page, or she has been emboldened by some of the younger female pop stars like Olivia Rodrigo and, most obviously on this album, Sabrina Carpenter, both of whom have been far more bold about exploring the sort of full range of their emotional lives than Taylor has been in the past. Taylor has been very locked in, infamously, certainly at the start of her career, into this kind of good girl, bad girl binary, and really a desperate desire to be seen as a good girl in all ways. And that would be incompatible, or that would be conventionally or historically or traditionally incompatible with the kinds of expressions of lust that we see on several of the songs in this album.
Yeah, and I wonder, as you're saying that, I did wonder about the recurrent motif of the eldest daughter, which shows up in Fate of Ophelia and shows up in the song called Eldest Daughter. And I wondered if, obviously Taylor is, in her own family, sort of an eldest daughter, but I did wonder about her being a sort of eldest daughter amongst this kind of cadre of female songwriters. And
I think that's a sharp point, and it also points a little bit to father figure as well, in which she's, Taylor is explicitly portraying herself as having these proteges, right, and being a kind of a mentor in various ways to these proteges.
Yeah, so I think that gets to the second theme that I saw on the album. It's hard being famous. You get a lot of attention from people. You get in beefs with other people. The music business, it's quite bad. Quite sort of rapacious. I saw this in Elizabeth Taylor. Father figure.
Wish list.
Wish list. Eldest daughter. Actually romantic.
I think Wish List is probably hits that theme most on the nose, and does it in ways that I think are a little more universal, right? And a little bit more open-hearted and capacious to engage with a broader audience than some of the others. I mean, of the bunch, Actually Romantic, I think, is in many ways the cleverest of those songs, and the smartest of those songs. But it also, it's hard. I know that you probably have a lot of scenarios in which you have people sort of dedicating a great deal of their lives to thinking about you.
No, it's just you.
But it's what she's describing is a kind of what feels like a pop star rivalry. Or at least a celebrity rivalry, in ways that I think are really clever and funny, right? And that's the other thing, is that this is a song that is funny in a way that Taylor is not always funny or has not always been willing to show herself in song as being funny.
You called me boring Barbie is a good line. Like boring Barbie is actually, you know, I know that's an insult put in the mouth of another person, but
only when you're brave on coke.
Yeah.
Right. That which is
right. But if you were not a Taylor Swift fan, boring Barbie is actually, you know,
on the nose.
Not a bad one.
Yeah.
So this is living in your head rent free, which is one of the oldest kind of things. And the way to subvert that is always to say like, oh, that's so cute, right? It's never to respond with anger. It's always to kind of flip it around on the other person. There's a very famous scene in Mad Men, which is one of my favorite TV shows, where kind of a young rival of Don Draper is in the elevator with him and says, Don, you know, you're a fraud. You disgust me. Everyone knows you're miserable. You're an alcoholic. You're living a double life. And I just, you know, I feel so sorry for you because you got to maintain this facade of success. And I just know that you're miserable. And I really feel sorry for you. And Don just says, I don't think about you at all. Yeah. And walks out the elevator. And that's the classic. That's what Taylor Swift is doing here.
It's the classic thing. But then the other thing that's happening, which I think is clever and sort of interesting and maybe unique, is that she's also saying, you know, and you're kind of turning me on like this.
Yes. Right. It's sort of hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. That degree of sort of ardor and all the rest of it is sort of hot. Yes, I agree. Wishlist, you'd mentioned contrast between a material life that many want, but she who has it all, presumably Taylor, just wants domestic bliss. Yeah. We tell the world to leave us alone, and they do. Yeah. Wow, didn't know that was possible.
Also a recurring theme. She has.
I was going to say
in her canon.
Yeah, and it's always such a delicate maneuver because it's. I think at one point she does talk about bringing a tiny violin to a knife fight, and there is a sort of world's smallest violin to quality to that.
And we also know that this is a momentary thought from her because we know as well that she has confessed quite openly. I mean, the most obvious song is Mirror Ball, that she needs to be in front of an audience and she needs to feel as though she is the center of attention.
Right.
So the chorus and wish list, I think, just sort of illustrates the way that those emotions can become like pendulum swinging back and forth.
Yeah. Father figure, the music business is not only paternalist, but sort of mobsterish in what's going on. You know, you actually need a big sort of Tony Soprano figure to cut the deal with the devil.
Well, and there are specific references to mob boss kind of stuff. You're going to be sleeping with the fishes. Yeah, she's not being subtle necessarily here, but there's there's not really. I mean, she's pretty generous, I think, to George Michael's estate here to give him writing credit.
Yeah, I didn't see
it's really it's the most minor. Right, of borrowings here. It's not much more really than the borrowing from something we talked about off camera, right? The reference to Dancing in the Dark, the Springsteen song.
Yes. Right? Which is just a lyric.
Just a lyric.
Yeah. Exactly. Third theme I thought was in some songs, nostalgia. Mm-hmm. That's in Eldest Daughter and Ruin the Friendship. Yeah. Ruin the Friendship's sort of a sweet song. And it does seem to do something lyrically, which is it's sort of lived in the near future. You know, I should have kissed you. Mm-hmm. And it seems like someone who's just looking back a couple of years. Yeah. And then the very last few words are like, my advice would be to always take that chance, which sounds like a much older Taylor looking back. And
she has seeded that in the last verse, which references second period, right? So she's talking about high school.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think it is. You're right. It's a kind of a sweet and bitter song that is a little surprising in the ways that some of her best songs from the Folklore and Evermore period were sort of surprising and bittersweet.
Yeah. Yeah. Fourth theme, I thought I saw, the internet is bad. So Eldest Daughter has that, and then Cancelled has that pretty much on the nose.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess people are thinking that Cancelled is about Blake Lively.
Okay.
And about her.
Oh, and what's his name?
Blake Lively and the guy.
That film guy?
Whoever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, and in which there was a kind of fallout on the on a movie set, and he was he was a star, but also the director.
I think so.
And then it came out that he'd hired a sort of Black Ops PR team to try and do in Blake Lively and do in her reputation.
And one of the ways of doing this was apparently by releasing some texts that Blake Lively had sent to him in which she threatened to send Taylor Swift after him.
Oh, really?
Because, you know, Blake Lively and Taylor have been famously very close. They've been like these sort of glamour friends with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. And so then has been a lot of rumors that Taylor and Blake are on the outs now because Taylor's upset that she got dragged into this litigation by Blake Lively.
Wow.
But if it's true that the song is about Blake Lively, I mean, it also is a song of sympathy, it seems to me, right? In which she's saying, Taylor's basically saying, welcome to the club, welcome to the canceled club, or welcome to the club of celebrities who get put through the ringer.
Well, it does have an odd valence because it's hard at points in the song to tell who is the person being cancelled and who is the canceller.
Yeah.
And at some point, it seems like Taylor is adopting the pose of someone who has done the damage, and then at other points, she's adopting the pose of someone who's the victim.
Yeah, which also is not that surprising. I mean, I think back to the song Antihero from Midnights, in which there is the kind of, you know, I mean, in my reading, that is a song that's all about the possibilities and the dangers of celebrity identification and a kind of parasocial relationship that develops between audiences and celebrities. And in that song, in Antihero, Taylor is simultaneously portraying herself as kind of victim to this complex, but also as an active instigator of it.
Yeah.
And here we get, I wonder if there's some parallels here with the way in which she's describing her role in the kind of the cancel culture elements of the contemporary world.
Right. And then the fifth and final theme I thought I saw is a really interesting one. It really does make me wonder about the genesis or the evolution of this album. And it's the theme, it's hard putting on a show. Yeah. It's not hard being famous kind of psychically, which was an earlier theme we talked about, but it's physically difficult to put on a show, to be a showgirl. And that's in life of a showgirl, which in some senses to me is the most interesting song. I find it to be the most musically eclectic, sort of internally, and maybe that's because it involves a second artist, and so her sensibilities are having to be brought in. And there's a notable change in kind of orchestration when Sabrina Carpenter starts singing, and I think maybe even a semitone shift. Also, you know, there's an interesting thing goes on when Sabrina Carpenter starts singing.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to listen to that more to pick it up. I also picked up on that. I'm not sure if it's just the difference in the timbre of their voices.
Yeah. Or if they changed the bet to fit
the key may have, might be a slight key change.
I got the sense there was. But also, it's interesting. I wouldn't have brought it up as a theme because it seems to be just in that one song, maybe a little bit in Elizabeth Taylor as well, except she called the album it. Yeah. And, you know, it did seem as if this was an album that she'd said she'd written it on the Eras tour, and it was going to be about how physically demanding it is to kind of put on this show. There were two articles, one in the New York Times and one in the Guardian yesterday, that were almost identical, that were about the history of showgirls and how, you know, Taylor Swift had to be careful with appropriating this because she's far too big. She's the lead star. She's not the kick line kind of trooper, and she's not the person working in the grimier, you know, putting on a luxurious show, but in actually quite grimy circumstances, which is the valence of showgirl imagery and showgirl mythology. And she had to be careful with that. But she actually hasn't made it central to that album. It's sort of just on that song.
And on the imagery of the song. But as you're saying that, I'm just realizing that in popular culture, in American popular culture, really the most famous or infamous invocation of the showgirl is the movie Showgirl.
The Paul Verhoeven one.
Yeah. Which is was infamously just a complete bomb. Right. And widely regarded as one of the worst movies of the 90s, but has come to have this kind of strange afterlife in the era of streaming. And I suspect that she would have needed to be careful about not appropriating that imagery as well. Right. Which is likely why. And maybe that's why when you look at the album cover and the various imagery that has been released around it, she's very much seems to be appropriating a kind of 1950s or 1960s Las Vegas era vibe with the showgirl, rather than a kind of a more contemporary, as you say, maybe grimy sort of aesthetic.
Yeah. So I also thought it was interesting lyrically, in that I thought it had both the best and the worst lines on the on the album, pretty much one after another. So I really like the opening line. Her name was Kitty. She made her money being pretty and witty.
Yeah.
And I love that triple rhyming. And I thought of no one will probably get this reference, but there's a songwriter I really like called Craig Finn, who has a band called The Hold Steady. He's always singing songs about people like Kitty, kind of small town, often women, but not exclusively, in small towns coming to big cities and being kind of swallowed up in grimy, dodgy kind of circumstances. And he has a number of kind of lyrical ticks, but that kind of triple rhyming screen, kitty, witty, pretty, delivered in that way. It was a classic Finnian
and it
line.
would not be a surprise in the least if Taylor is referencing him there. I mean, she is far more musically literate than she's typically given credit for.
Yeah.
And we see it on this album, and not to derail us necessarily, but, you know, I think that Opalite is very clearly Beach Boys influence. It sounds a lot like Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
Particularly in the chorus, there's the reference to Springsteen's Dancing in the Dark. There's
the Jackson 5
the
business,
Jackson 5.
in Wood.
Yep.
Yeah. Which sounds a lot like I Want You Back, the guitar intro.
And then so it wouldn't surprise me in the least if she regularly listens to The Hold Steady.
Yeah. So that's a great line. Her name was Kitty, and she made her money being pretty and witty. But then the next two lines are, they gave her the keys to the city, which is kind of a weird shift, but she didn't do it legitly, which it's kind of like, that needed a bit more workshop. And there are one or two places where you see the seams of like a half line or something that doesn't quite scan, and it's not, you know, look, no one's perfect, but it's not quite the machine tooled pop perfection.
Yeah, I mean, when you get those kinds of strange lines, they stick. And she, in her career, this is not that unusual. She will occasionally have a line that feels like it could have used a bit more editing.
Yeah.
And part of that is just that when you're as prolific, I suspect, as she is, that you're going to have some clunky lines. And when, as something you mentioned off camera, that when her persona and her voice is so prominent on every song, there's very little in the way of instrument, of non-vocal instrumentality, right, that takes place in these songs. You're putting a lot of pressure on the lyrics here.
Right.
And, you know, there's going to be some clunkers in there.
Right. And I did wonder, maybe this is a point we'll finish with. I did wonder if at one point Life of a Showgirl was going to be sort of a concept album based around Kitty the character. And it just sort of seemed to be kind of setting that up, but it's not the first song in the album, which is kind of what it feels like it would be in that context. It's kind of the last song. And
it's the last song. And I will say, I think it works as the last song.
Yeah.
Because the 42 minutes feel complete. And you would rather want to go listen to it again from the beginning than kind of wipe your brow of the sweat of what it took to get through.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it goes down easy, which pop records should do. There's a lot of interesting thematic work. It's musically interesting and varied, and I really enjoyed digging into it. You know, so thank you for joining us for our instant kind of takes. I mean, you know, we'd love to hear what you think in the comments section. Every hot take is as cold as ice, but we want to get yours. And on that bombshell,